Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're talking about how we can prepare for a potential conflict in UK. The other day I have done a video when we talked about what potentially could happen if UK would enter in conflict. And at the end of the video, I did say I'm going to be bringing out the video to talk about what we can do and how we can prepare our family if that were to happen. First of all, okay, just to confirm guys, when I'm talking about the conflict, I'm not talking about the full-blown war. There is currently a lot of conflicts currently happening, but for us in United Kingdom, the chances of the full-blown war are pretty remote at the moment. So when I'm talking about the conflict, I'm talking about the grey zone conflict. And this is what really we've been warned about from a government to say it's more likely to happen. So when they talk about the grey zone attacks, they're talking about attacks on the infrastructure, trying to destabilize the country and panic the population. So, all right, I've created a little list and I'm going to make this printable on my website for anybody who's interested. And we're just talking about and covering a very basics of preparedness here. If you follow my channel, you know guys, I am a preparedness channel. So we talk about a lot of things in a roundabout way, but everything is related to the preparedness one way or to another. And we do cover a whole array of subjects. But this is a very basic one, okay? This is a baseline for people that are potentially thinking that they need to start preparing for whatever it is. And again, the preparedness journey is different for everybody. And some of the things on here might not be totally relevant to you. Or in fact, you might feel that you don't want to prepare for a specific scenario because it is very unlikely to happen, which is absolutely fine. This is your journey, your preparedness, you make your own choices. But hopefully this will give you some ideas of where you can start and certain things you might have forgotten about or haven't thought about. So first of all, as I said guys, I'm going to make this list printable on the website, but I'm going to go through with you. So first of all, the things we are talking about, the preparedness in this video and all my other videos, and something I'll tell you later on in the video, right? We're talking about the power cuts, we're talking about the lack of access to food and medicine for different reasons. We're talking about the waves of misinformation, again, depending on what is happening, disruption to communication systems and internet, and of course the financial instability, be it due to the sanctions or the cyber attacks. So first of all, okay, cyber warfare, this is one of the probably top ones on the list as the worry to myself and probably generally to us as a country. For the past 6 months, if you follow, you know, there's been tons and tons of cyber attacks on anything from supermarkets to hospitals to universities to MOD, when they stole a lot of information of the names, addresses and phone numbers of the people that have registered with the services. So things like attacks on the NHS, on the water, on the power grids, are very, very likely and already happened in the past. So we're talking about the supply chain issues. Again, it could be happening for many, many reasons, including sanctions or cyber attacks, which we've seen already. So when we're talking about the conflicts in Europe, in Middle East, it's all potentially going to be affecting certain things. We're talking about the petrol, we're talking about the, obviously generally as a fuel, we're talking about the wheat, we're talking about the medicine that gets imported from EU or China. There's a lot of things out there that does get imported. And as you know, we're in Ireland, we do rely on this quite a lot. So to be prepared for certain things, it is very, very important. So next thing is the misinformation warfare. Again, it pretty much happens quite a lot, but it will get worse if we're going to have a lot of things happening. So generally with the misinformation, we're talking about misinformation from potentially from the news outlets, from the social media. It could be happening pretty much everywhere. So of course, it will create the confusion. It could create panic in people because some people find it difficult to distinguish what potentially is actually truth, what is not. And in some instances, of course, people can turn on each other because again, I think the worst thing for us as a human being is not knowing or not understanding what's happening. And now we're talking about the sabotage or attacks on the infrastructure. And again, we've seen this before, but as tensions escalate, things could get worse. And we're talking about attacks on the water plants, on power plants, on train stations, airports. They're all becoming a very soft target. So this is kind of, guys, the areas of things we considering or should be considering when starting your preparedness journey, or generally if you want to make sure that your family is somewhat prepared for those potential issues. So in front of me, as I said, I have a list which I will publish online. We were talking about basically a preparedness framework. And it is very basics. It is a baseline of the preparedness for something for you to think about, just as I said. So for example, okay, we're talking about number one is having the contingency plan. Whatever scenario you are preparing yourself for or your family for, you must have an idea, or in fact, you need to have an idea of the backup plan. So if something were to happen, what would you do? So we're talking about, do you have a person, an elderly person, somebody you have to keep an eye out if something were to happen? Do you have area you need to go to or you can go to if something is unsafe to be staying in your own house? If you have, say, family members that are going to school or university, if suddenly you're not able to get in touch with them because the systems are down, phones are down, do you have a plan where you can meet each other because you're no longer able to communicate and make an arrangement? All of that stuff, okay, have to be thought of, and you have to have yourself a plan so you're ready for any eventuality. So next thing is build yourself an emergency kit, okay? They all suggesting that we do a 72-hour emergency kit, which I understand is somewhere to start, but in the real world, 72 hours, it's not a lot, and it's really, really not going to get you through any further than a little bit of power cut or the water outage for a little while. If we're talking about something a little bit more serious that will be happening, it will be happening for longer than 3 days. So get yourself kit ready for more than just 3 days. And of course, the emergency kit they're talking about is water. As we know, we can't live without water. So we need to have water, and minimum really you want 2 liters a day. This is just for drinking and cooking per person, and this is just absolutely bare minimum. Food, of course, is great to stock up on the dry foods, but don't forget all of the dry foods that need cooking, like rice and pasta, require extra water. So stocking up on that good, but make sure you stock up on extra water. Things like the ready to eat, be it tins or any other things, snacks, a really, really good thing to have in your kit. Things like the first aid kit, again, very important anyway. In any scenario, you should have one, but if you haven't got one, something to think about. Things like baby food, pet food, personal care, all those sort of things have to be taken into account. And of course, there are other things that we've been told to prepare, things like emergency radio, candles, extra batteries. It all kind of goes without saying, but of course, your main priority should be food and water. So now we're talking about really your personal information, and it's not something really people cover a lot of, and it might go without saying for some, but I'm sure there'll be people that probably overlook that kind of thing. So things like photocopies of your, say, passport, photocopies of your NHS card or any other important cards that you have, the one that prove your identity, maybe even a driving license, information for your banking, for example, because we all have, or majority of us have, a lot of things saved on your phone, online, so it's easy to for you to log in. But if something happens and you suddenly lose that access, you want to be able to have something in paper. At the same time, we're talking about the information, the addresses and phone numbers of your friends and family, because I'm sure, well, I know for a fact that I don't know every phone number in my phone book, but if I need to dial an emergency and my phone doesn't work, or I don't have this, then I'll be totally lost. So it's very, very important to know the addresses and the phone numbers of people printed out. And of course, one of the most important things is to keep them away from your original points of information. If we're talking about, say, the photocopy of your passport, keep it in a separate location in a bag, ideally in your kit, the one sitting there by your front door somewhere ready to go, or in a cupboard. Basically, if you do have a bag to get out of the house, then you should keep that kind of information there. So we're talking about, say, securing your home. And I'm not talking about securing your home from sort of invasion and looters. We're talking about very basic things. Make sure to check your smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms are working. Make sure in some instances you know how to turn off your electricity or water to your house. So give you an example, and I know this, a lot of people overlook that. If, for example, God forbid, you have a burst water pipe. Okay, first of all, do you know who to call? And secondly, firstly, do you know how to turn the water off at source to your house to minimize the damage? And then secondly, do you know who you're going to call right away? Do you have this number somewhere there in that instance? Chances are probably not, so it's something to think about. So next thing, guys, we're talking about really financial stability. I'm not going into the details of finances here. I'm not to give you guys the financial advice, but what we have been told is to make sure that we have some cash. In fact, we've actually been told to stockpile some cash in case of an emergencies. And I get it, okay? None of us have millions of pounds just sitting there that we can just take what we want and just stash this under the mattress. But the point is to be able to have some money just in case in cash at your house. It's a very good idea. We're just looking back at Spain, where they have the power grid down. and people panicked, and people gone down the shops to stock up on some food and water. And of course, the payment systems didn't work. So you can only buy yourself food and water if you had cash. Well, technically, if you had some preparedness of food and water in the house, you wouldn't have to run there and fight the queues to do that. But the point is, their systems only, or people were only able to buy some stuff if you had cash. And the next thing is talking about your knowing your local resources. And again, it really depends where you live, okay? If you live in a small village, you're probably fully aware where you have your local hall and the church, that sort of thing. But if you do live in a slightly larger area, you might not be aware where your local hall is or your local church. But all those areas, or all those places or points, in fact, are very important in case of an emergency. Because if you know, generally if you watch any films, anything that happens that you need to kind of evacuate your house potentially, generally you are directed to either local hall or local church. So knowing where any of those points of support are, it is absolute must. And of course, we're talking about the last bit is building the mental resilience and preparing your family. I understand generally there's a lot of things happening in the world, and sometimes, or potentially, things could get worse. So if you're of the disposition where you're worried or don't like watching a lot of news, when things go a little bit peep-tong, it's strongly advisable to step away and reconsider and avoid sort of feeding on the news and potentially the misinformation. The important point is to prepare your family. This is the whole idea, guys. The preparedness is the key. Maybe run some drills, run some test scenarios. Get your whole family involved into preparing their emergency kits. Because sometimes, and a lot of people comment that you say you're the only prepper in the family because other people kind of look at you and laughing, but nobody really wants to get involved and prepare. But it is really, really important. I think before the things happen, it's very important to try to encourage your family to get involved. Because if they get involved, you can run through the scenarios or evacuation scenarios, all that sort of thing. And in certain scenarios, that could be very, very important. So, as I said, this was a very, very basic baseline of the things. The whole world of preparedness is far bigger than that. And if we are talking about the proper preparedness, we need to get in a little bit more of the details of what does actually means to be prepared for those scenarios. As I said, this is literally a very, very basic. So, okay, I'm bringing out a new series. I'm going to be calling 1 Week, 1 Prep. Okay, and this is going to be a series of a few weeks when we're going to be looking at individual preparedness things. For example, okay, we're talking about water. Water is number one a preparedness item that you should be starting your prepping journey with, of course, alongside the food. But for example, on week 1, we're going to be talking about the water preparedness, and we're going to go into great details of discussing, okay, what you should have or where you should start. I'll try to make it, again, simple. And again, I'm trying to split this into 2 parts, where the first part we're talking about if you're totally new and where you should start your water preparedness, and the part 2, or towards the end, we're going to be talking about a great detail and if you're a little bit more advanced with your preparedness. At the same time, where possible, okay, there'll be a printable list for you to print off my website relevant to that week. So basically the point is, or the point of those videos would be, is to encourage you to take a step, okay, towards the preparedness. So each week there'll be something new, okay, potentially new to you, that we're going to be talking about based on what you need to either stock or prepare. And then, as I said, it's going to be done in great detail. So that means you got a whole week to potentially step back, think about it, and make your choices what you think you want to do to start your preparedness journey. And as well, I'll try to make them in order of importance. So we're going to start with the most important things first, okay? And then as weeks go on, there are going to be things that are kind of further down the list. But as your preparedness journey grows, hopefully that will help you get there. So there we are, guys. I hopefully have enjoyed this video. Please don't forget, thumbs up, subscribe if you're not a subscriber, and I shall see you in the next video. Bye-bye.